Ambassador Verveer, I'm going to start with a question on elections. Were you surprised about the turnout of the women participating in election in Afghanistan, which was almost over 30%? And how do you assess the result of the election?
In one way, I was surprised because I knew the great courage that it was required on the part of so many to vote, and particularly the women. And the fact that they must have been thinking that they were potentially risking their lives, that by making that great act that they wanted to send as a strong message about the future of their country and about their commitment to having a better future. And so to know that one cares so deeply.
Are you concerned at all about the future of Afghan women after U.S. and NATO forces leave Afghanistan at the end of this year?
Well, you know, we've been very worried about the transition all along. I hear from so many of the Afghan women. We have a program here at Georgetown University in Washington where we devoted a whole day to keeping the spotlight on the role of women in Afghanistan. One that I'm going to have to cut that, I'm sorry. One in which Secretary of State Kerry participated in, former Secretary Clinton was here, Mrs. Bush was here. So a real abiding commitment with so many leaders from foreign countries that the future of Afghanistan is tied to the future of Afghan women. So leaving no doubt about that, but also concerns about what could come in the future. And those concerns revolve around, of course, the fact that there will be a major shift without the military presence that has been there to support, but also a concern about whether the bilateral security agreement is going to be signed. And we know that when President Karzai called the Loya Jirga, the Jirga gave a very strong recommendation that there be a continued presence to support the security that now would be provided by the Afghan military and the Afghan police, but that needed ongoing support in a variety of ways from the United States and other international, the NATO forces. Now the great hope is, since both of the leading candidates now, we know in terms of the election vote being counted, both of them have said they would support signing the bilateral security agreement. So I think that's very good because that's where the majority of the Afghan people are as well. They want to know that their prospects for security going forward will be not lessened, but will be there for them so that they can go on with building the country. So I think that's very important.
Right. You mentioned Secretary Clinton and First Lady Laura Bush. You have worked closely with both of them, and you came up with initiatives such as Vital Voices. What are your plans for women around the world, especially Afghan women?
Well, we continue to obviously be committed to Afghan women. As you know so well, I have worked with Mrs. Clinton in her years as First Lady in the Senate, and then as ambassador at the State Department when she was secretary. And I can tell you, in all of those years, she has truly kept faith with the Afghan women, the Afghan people, in terms of what they were going through and in terms of a sense of commitment from all of us. You know, I remember so well when President Clinton was in the White House. Mrs. Clinton was one of the few people, even in those years, who was speaking out against what the Taliban were perpetrating against the women. So she's had this very strong understanding of what needs to be done. And then when she became senator and we founded the NGO called the Vital Voices Global Partnership, one of her first acts and one of the first things we did in Vital Voices was to bring the Afghan women together, a large number of them. It was now the Bush administration. There was an effort to truly push back the Taliban and move them out. And in those years, Mrs. Clinton worked very hard to make the case that we all wanted a better future for Afghanistan, as Afghans wanted for themselves. But it could not happen if half the population was marginalized or not engaged.
UNAMA, United Nations Assistance Mission for Afghanistan, in a recent press release emphasized in participation of Afghan women in political settlements, including peace talks with Taliban, giving the 2014 deadline. Do you think can Afghan women count on international community's help?
Well, I certainly hope they can. And I am sitting here talking to you at Georgetown University, where we have a new institute focused on the role of women in peace and security. And of course, Afghanistan is the test case. We know that more than a decade ago, the Security Council of the United Nations passed a resolution that has been enhanced over the years that links women to peace and security in their countries, and particularly underscores the need for women, who are half the population, more than that in Afghanistan, to be fully participating in negotiations going forward. Now, that hasn't always happened. Many of the peace agreements that get signed then are abrogated. The violence occurs again because the real issues aren't put on the table. And we know that where women have been engaged in peace processes, they have brought issues to the table that need to be addressed. Issues like transitional justice, human rights, employment opportunities, the kinds of issues that the country has to face going forward, that have to be addressed, that cannot be just discounted because the future holds on them.